Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co host Patric, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all.
You know what? I was actually about to start with some small talk like I usually do with these episodes, but I realized that I might have gotten a perfect segue to what we're going to discuss, Patrick.
Aha.
So obviously, I round out a beautifully recorded intro for this show by saying this show is about nothing at all. You know what is definitely not nothing at all, Patrick? What
I
we
guess
what we look for in companies.
I
Because it's the opposite of nothing at all.
it's something special that we're looking for. That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we're going to talk about that. So we felt like it was worth dedicating an episode to a little bit a trip down memory lane, Shub, of the 7 years of Fundamental since we've been starting investing together with each other and Adam
Hmm.
into AEC technology, architecture, engineering, construction technology firms.
Hmm.
Um, and what were the different special things that made us move on some of the companies where we can give actual examples now with the benefit of hindsight? I guess, several have played out, maybe some haven't played out. We'll find out in the
Yeah.
episode.
Hmm. Yeah, sounds like a interesting topic. I mean, in the past, we have, of course, discussed unique and special traits in founders that we look for. I don't remember the episode number, but if you're interested, dig through the archives. I'm sure you'll find it. I think we recorded it sometime last year. But this is perhaps, maybe we'll touch upon the founders as well, but this is to also discuss the traits in the companies, the various things they display, and how that plays into how we evaluate companies.
All right. So I can start us off. So
Hmm.
and maybe one additional piece of context. So we are a startup still. I like to think of Fundamental as a post Series B type
Yeah.
startup. Maybe we're now investing out of Fund 3. We're
Hmm.
managing about 250 million. We started off with 59 in 2019. Sorry, 59 euros, about, I don't know, 65 US. Um, so we've matured ourselves, and part of the maturing process, if you do a good job, is that you learn from mistakes, that you kind of hone in on things, you're focusing, you're finding sweet spots, etc. And so one of these, I think, processes of maturation for us were also realizing what kinds of things we find special, where in what kinds of special items about companies we have found success, we believe in success,
Hmm.
etc. And so let me start us off maybe um, with one company that I did about 18 months ago, so relatively frequently,
Hmm.
but it serves as a um, special item because the combination I haven't seen. So this company is a company called Faktus, Faktus, um, company in France that operates broadly. So this is not going to be about the company that operates broadly in financing and payments between contractors and their customers.
Hmm.
Um, I really like where the firm is going. I'm happy with the direction, etc. But the item, and this was an interesting diligence process for us. So the diligence that we took overall might have taken 10 to 12 weeks in 2023,
Hmm.
and the founders were gracious enough to allow us to do that because they were very mature. I think from day one realized that if they can get an investor that can maximize their conviction, it will help them for 7 to 10 years rather than
Mm.
rushing people through the process, etc. So that was really great. And the reason why I mentioned that all of that as a context is because the piece that stood out as special here, there was another item, but the piece that stood out as special were both founders coming with completely different backgrounds, but both non-linear in their own
Mm.
way. And then they operated like brothers. So let me
Mm.
explain. One founder is Alex, the other is Reda. Alex is a founder that when he started his career 13, 14 years ago, he founded a health tech company, bootstrapped it, grew revenue, was profitable, sold the company. Never raised VC for the firm, did a good exit for himself.
Okay.
And then what Alex did was completely nonlinear again. And he took the money and he bought a traditional contractor firm that was in financial distress.
Okay.
He turned that company around, he grew its revenue, and he exited again. So he went through the life of a contractor and of the owner of a contracting firm, from financial distress to growing, profitable, selling. Shub, how many people do you know that actually do this? These are things that people do who don't believe that the knowledge you need in order to build ventures lies at university or lies at Google.
Yeah.
This is the kind of person that does that. And that's what I mean by nonlinear. Now, he found a partner in Reda, who in himself is also nonlinear. So Reda has had a banking career. Then he worked in management consulting. Up until here, it's completely linear, if you ask me. But then he went into restructuring of companies. And then he went into the insurance business as a chief operating officer for heavy industries, including construction. And that's where he realized that there's no ability to distribute financial products, both financing as well as insurance products, to contractors. The underwriting model needs to be very different. The distribution motion oftentimes doesn't work the same way because the ticket sizes are not the same size as they would be, for example, for big manufacturing clients, etc. And since the two had known each other for 8 years, and Alex had just sold his contracting business, somehow the two caught up and they realized, holy crap, we believe in the exact same thing for very granular reasons because we have a wide set of experiences. So not like a singular linear experience, but a wide set of different experiences. And then they came together. One of them knows the financing insurance piece from different perspectives. The other knows exactly how contractors work, how the businesses work, how to speak their jargon, their lingo, how to be credible and have we call it the barn smell here in German. And then, that basically means that you're credible. And they came together and they did Faktus and they acted like brothers. Like the way they work with each other, they talk to each other. It's very unfiltered, no ego, no vanity, unbelievable. So it was like fireworks when going back to the diligence process after 10 to 12 weeks, we kind of came together for us. We realized that that's what they are individually, but also as a band of brothers between the two. And that's very special in this business. It's very special that you find two such complementary but non-linear founders that then fit actually to the opportunity that you're doing. And it's so special, like the fact that I can't think of another example.
Oh, that is, firstly, thanks for sharing. I think that is quite nice. I think the very interesting aspect of what you bring up, obviously, when we bring up unique cases like that, and I think we have a few of those in Foundamental. In each case, obviously, it's a very compelling story and clearly a very compelling case for that making the company or the opportunity special. But of course, Patric, as you may be well aware, a debate you and I often have, right, is what matters most, right? Right. And I think you quite often side on the side of team. I'm not saying team is not important, but quite often in these debates, I've taken the side of team not being the number one reason,
But
right?
traction.
So not necessarily traction, because traction doesn't apply in the case of pre-seed companies, right? And although I will say, now the interesting thing about team, right? And I think which is where maybe we are closer. What I have noticed in VC parlance in general, and how deeming a team to be great, what that means, and how that is the nomenclature or the accolade of calling a team great is used. It's random, but also very straitjacketed in what being a strong team is even means. So that way, I like your use of the word non-linear, as in you can only become great when you're a non-linear founder or a non-linear team of founders. And which is why the way I like to ask myself that question, in the absence of traction or By the way, traction is not the number one point on my mind, but I'll get to that later in this episode, perhaps. But what I like to ask myself is usually two questions, and one, depending on the situation, one is more appropriate than the other. Is either, can I find a better founder or pair of founders or trio of founders to start a company like this, right? Or can I envision this founder or team of founders to be doing this company as their life's work, right? Now, again, a lot of people listening to this may say, hey, a lot of people say this. Isn't this just passionate startup jargon? But let me explain what I mean by that. If a founder or a team of founders intends to do this as life's work, hopefully with the intention of compounding upon it, what that also means is when things get really bad and really dark, you will not you'll not walk away from things because it's bad, it's dark, and you will always have in mind the idea of removing bottlenecks from your journey. Therefore, you'll be focused on the bottlenecks. You'll not be focused on what could go well, because perhaps you are aware, because it's a large market or whatever, for other reasons, it's perhaps attainable, the larger outcome, but it's attainable only if you remove bottlenecks, right? So the one interesting takeaway for me with what you said about Reda and Alex, and we have many other such examples, is it seems like perhaps given the unique experiences, maybe this is going to be their life's work. And I can imagine in their conversations with each other, as well as probably also with conversations with you, they're more focused on bottlenecks, etc., rather than how things will go tremendously well. In fact, if I may make a extremely random detour, but staying on the same topic, this reminds me of the very first meeting I had with Inframarket, like about 6 years ago.
You mean on Valentine's Day?
Exactly. Correct. On Feb the 14th of 2019. And I remember in that discussion, the discussion went something along the lines of, so they were at that time live only in Mumbai, in India. And at that time, the plan was, hey, for the next 3 to 4 years, right, they'll only be in Mumbai. Now, ask any VC, right? And, I didn't know any better back then, to be honest. Or I guess I had bought in too much to like generic VC tropes. That part of my thinking or my brain was like, hey, what are you saying? You'll just stay in one city all this time? That's completely unambitious, etc. I mean, the truth is just a few months later, they were already in 3 cities from there. But what I had not realized, and which thankfully I think now we look actively for, is that's more him articulating the worst case, right? Worst case, and kind of setting investors up to know the worst case if any and all bottlenecks come along his way. And if all those bottlenecks are removed, things will get much better, which is a fascinatingly different way of articulating a business.
I mean, that's maturity, but it requires also maturity in the investor, and I think a little bit of self-confidence and, for the lack of a better term, sway in the investor's organization to realize that maturity is a good thing and is not under ambitious. Because, like we discuss very often, many people practice the fashion of VC as chasing and reselling great news. Now, that is not something that Shovik did with you there. He didn't set you up for going back to your partners and saying, oh my God, this is the most ambitious founder I have ever heard, the best conversation. This is world domination territory, 25 cities within 3 months. I mean, how often do you hear BS like that, right?
Correct.
People crave it and resell it. No, then it takes a mature investor to actually also, run with that.
And look, in full disclosure, I must confess at that point of time, I hadn't even realized that I did not have the maturity or the level of self-awareness or maybe overall development as an investor to realize that I was actually speaking with a far more, a founder who had leveled up beyond the usual founder tropes and was comfortable in his own skin and was therefore talking like that. And judging him off of the generic, templates that we are taught of what to look for. So I think what I want to really emphasize, right? And I think we have, again, covered this in our previous episode on founder traits, but I want to emphasize that the takeaway here is not to say, hey, we look for special founders, which is what perhaps every VC says. What special means, I think in general has changed a lot, as people will realize, but especially so in construction tech. What I feel like, because as we mentioned in our most recent episode, the early success stories are being built now. For anyone to pretend like they have everything figured out, etc., it's getting ahead of themselves at the very best, right? If not, maybe completely immature in the worst case. And therefore, you probably want to go with someone who is being very truthful, can look you straight in the eye, can tell you this is all the ways it could go wrong, so that you actually are prepared for how it could go wrong, and you actually look to solve it and remove bottlenecks as you go along, because that's how businesses compound.
I would count that as very special, actually. And the other thing that I'm using from this example, and I'll double underline, special is not the universities you attended.
Yes.
Special is not the employers that you worked for.
Yeah.
Special is not how much money you fundraised in the past.
Yeah.
Special is non-linearity for me. That's what I'm looking for, especially for AEC, because AEC is so quirky, so nuanced. And also, you're never getting tired of pointing this out, I think, and it's worth re-mentioning. We are, as an industry, in the Internet 1.0 stage. We're so nascent. We're still building pipes and rails and data infrastructure that it does take people who have the skills to be pioneers. And that's what I mean by non-linearity. I think a great founder that I fall in love with, or a team, when that is the piece that is special about a company, typically comes with an experience set that other people have never even considered doing. Here's another example. I looked at a company in December. The founder sold his previous company for about, I think, 5 or 6 million. Not a huge outcome, but hey, really battled for paying the investors back, and it was valuable experience. But then for his next company, he joined the military special forces.
Okay.
There he realized the manufacturing opportunity, and he thought to himself, hey, this was going to be something where franchising plays a role. And you know what he did? He went through the McDonald's franchising process.
Oh, nice.
How many people do you think would actually do that? Most of the 99.99 something percent of the founders would not do that. Yeah. They would actually sit at their desk or maybe call people that have gone through the experience, thinking that that would give them sort of a efficiency edge on getting the same information. But taking the experience to the extreme, that's what an example of nonlinearity looks like. And I think it translates so well into AEC just because of the quirks and nuances and the nascency that we're in, where you can literally translate all of that quirky life experience and mold it into a category leading proposition. That's what I think of it.
Yeah. I think before we move on to other aspects of a special company that we look for, and I'm sure you've also realized this, Patric, when you have founders with these traits, what actually makes it quite cool is when things get tough, and they will definitely get tough, at least once or twice in any great company's life, you will have to have difficult conversations. And it's so much. So one other thing I look for, if possible, and you don't always get such opportunities, but I try to look for situations where I can actually have difficult conversations with the founders and how they react. Usually what I find is when they come with the maturity, with the ability to point out bottlenecks, point out weaknesses, that they're also more comfortable with handling difficult conversations. Because let's face it, if they do not have the ability to get into the weeds of difficult conversations, what that means, very practically speaking, in the future, if you're looking at a situation of, say, a down round or a bridge round or some sort of other discussion of communicating bad news, you're maybe avoiding each other. Negotiations take way longer than they should, et cetera, which is all extremely counterproductive to the company, to the point of maybe it just falls apart for that reason.
Look, we're in a decision-making business. Founders are in a decision-making business. Investors are in a decision-making business, and decisions are run on acquiring and processing information. If you can't deal with that, if you think the truth hurts, or it's better for you not to have to hear the truth from a friend like your investor, then you will be setting yourself up for poor decision-making. That's what this is.
Indeed.
Okay, so the special thing with the example of Faktus, nonlinear founders. Shub, walk us through a deal that you are proud of and what was special at the time that made you move on it.
So look, unfortunately, I mean, I'm very tempted to yet again go back to the infra market well, but let me not do that just yet. Let me.
By the way, also two very nonlinear founders, two accountants.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, I was just recounting the shared journey we have had with them, also reflecting on some of the things. They were so nonlinear that at the time we backed them, they weren't on LinkedIn. So there you go. There you go. Yeah. All right. One interesting founder pair I want to call out, and maybe we'll touch upon the aspects of this anyway later on in other things around traction, numbers, and all that sort of stuff, is the team from Freight. A very unique blend of founders, a pair of founders. Interestingly, both have exactly the same first name. That's besides the point. But when we backed them, one guy was about 30, give or take. Another one was in their mid-50s. So quite a unique dynamic there in terms of age. Both had previously, very, very interesting, odd, and refreshingly unique combination of ages. Both very highly experienced in their industry. Obviously, the most senior gentleman was more accomplished, had even sold a business previously in the logistics industry. Normally, what you would find, especially in the construction or AC tech industry, Patrick, when you have a dynamic like that, is usually the more experienced, more senior person automatically takes on the role of, let's say, being the dominant founder who tends to not necessarily boss over the younger person, but has that effect of, let's say, overshadowing the other person. And I cannot tell you one of the words that automatically came to my mind when I met this team the first few times. The word that comes to mind is harmony, right? I can't go into too much specific detail, but I guess to cut a long story short, the level of maturity that the most senior founder here at Freight demonstrated in letting the younger founder be the boss, also recognizing that that's what the business needs, and the way they feed off of each other. And again, we can't go into specific details, but you know some of it, Patrick. So there's very, very specific roles they play on when, a very mature, soft conversation needs to be had, how one individual takes over. When it's day-to-day operation stuff, another person takes over. It's a brilliant dynamic, right? Which is why I always look forward to talking to them and meeting to them. And I always feel like every difficult conversation can be easily solved. And you're made to feel very good even after a difficult conversation, which is a very rare skill, by the way.
Wow.
I have to say. Yeah. So, again, I remember the early days before the company had scaled up, raised all their rounds, and we were in discussions with them for one of the rounds as well. The most senior founder came and he said a few things which clearly came from the heart, and they were so well phrased. The choice of words, which clearly just showed that the person had all that wisdom of what it takes to create partnerships. And I was just like, hey, I love you, man. I love talking to you, I have to say. So it was really like a beautiful moment for me. And the good news is, I mean, they don't just talk, they actually feed off of each other in terms of responsibilities, wisdom as well. And it's a beautiful mix in terms of founder personas.
I can attest. It's truly special. And sometimes you find these things out, Shub, after years.
Yeah.
But in this case, you didn't. In this case, it was evident from the start to you.
Yeah, it was one of those unique cases. even as we were actually underwriting our very first investment in the company, it was even a few of the changes where, by the way, without the investors prodding, they would just show up and say, hey, we have decided to make these changes. Again, I can't go into details, but make these changes, acknowledging what each person needs to do and who represents what for the company. And it would be a surprisingly easy conversation to have. Normally, you'd expect these things either to not happen or to eventually get discovered or to eventually be brought up. It was very, very smooth sailing. And I was just like, wow, what a wonderful thing to serendipitously discover and find out while you're diligencing your first round of investment.
This was 2020-ish?
Yeah, late 2020, early 2021. Yes.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, that the way you describe it, I can't say. So maybe with a recently invested team, they have an amazing dynamic as well, but I wouldn't describe amazing as in blind trust. They can finish each other's sentences. But harmony wouldn't be the word to describe it.
Okay.
So the way you're describing it, it sounds very, very special.
Yeah. It is a very, very unique founder dynamic, I have to say. One of the best founder dynamics I've seen in my career.
Man, we talk way more about founders than we actually wanted. I want to pivot somewhere else, but I want to tell you about a team that I backed. Just real quick, because here's another thing that can be nonlinear about you. And in some business context or in life context, many people would classify you as a weakness. But if you're building a company, all of a sudden, things that you have experienced in your life or personality traits and even medical illnesses can become a strength in the context of building a firm in AEC.
Yeah.
I've backed two founders. One of them is a diagnosed autist. And the other one is diagnosed dyslexic.
Oh, okay.
And that in itself doesn't tell you much, right? So it's it's just a feature, characteristic. But what it has translated into is that these founders are so insanely proficient in processing details at volume, at speed, and coming to really, really good decisions with it. That is, it demonstrated a core strength during the times that I had met them and visited them, far beyond the information processing capability that I had seen in other founders.
Yeah.
And at the end of the process, so the way they communicated was like completely unlike any founder conversation I had. It's difficult to describe it exactly, but think of it like certain words that they use, the way they address you, the speed with which they communicated.
Yes.
And so for a while I had thought, okay, I mean, I don't know, can they really deal with customers that way, etc. And so at the end of the process, they had demonstrated the other side of that characteristic, which is processing information. And so I asked them at some point, hey, like, this is what I've noticed. This is what I observed. And that's when they disclosed to me, yeah, actually, I'm dyslexic. And he has Asperger's, the other one. And I realized, holy shit, they're on the neural spectrum. They are neurodiverse. And I completely fell in love into the strength side, what that means in terms of specialty. Now, we'll have to show whether that translates also into an IPO case. But the processing of information in the decision-making business that we're in, I thought that was very special. By the way,
when you had this eureka moment realizing, I remember you and I had a chat, but while I don't know, and I don't want to name the companies involved, obviously, but that's what led to me also realizing that there's two companies in our portfolio in Asia where, especially the early days when we were speaking with those founders, there was really no rhythm or fluency in the way they would speak. It would often seem like they're either running out of breath or words are being said either too fast or in asymmetric or heterogeneous speeds are randomly. But when you get into the weeds more and more, they have surprisingly granular answers and surprising level of insights on what to
That's it.
do if X happens, do Y, and in that situation, if this happens, do this, etc., which is a really fascinating combination of traits. I think the usual VC archetype, unfortunately, does not favor these kinds of founders, but I think there's anecdotal evidence to suggest that they actually may have an unfair advantage in certain kinds of businesses.
Very special, and I was drawn to it, and I think you explained it way better than I could. I think your explanation is exactly what went on. Yeah. Okay, so let's not talk about founders anymore. So
Yes.
founders, many different ways to be special, but in the end, non-linearity is the better word to describe special. When I first invested in Enter, this was 2022. The company was practically bootstrapped, had raised like absolute minuscule amount of money from family, friends, the third party, the FFF. But they had scaled the business with practically no burn to about 1.2 million in annualized net revenue. True, I'm not talking about GMV.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about, net revenue. About 10% month over month growth, practically bootstrapped, and was net profitable. Gross margins of about 75%, and net profitable. Also very good free cash flow, working capital cycle about 6 to 8 weeks at the time.
Okay.
Not too bad, was okay for a company that bootstrapped. You could already sense maybe that is inhibiting growth a little bit for them, which is a good time when you want to get involved. But so this was something very special in a European context. You almost never get to see high growth, profitable businesses bootstrapped. You every now and then get to see companies that can achieve bootstrap net profitability and scale over 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. You obviously can see people and companies that buy growth, burning 10 million to get to 1 million of ARR in 2 years. That's anything but special. Sorry, I mean, that's literally, probably AI can build such companies nowadays. But the combination of 1.2 million in relatively quick fashion, I would have to go back, but it was probably like 18 months, something like that. Bootstrapped, net profitable. It's very, very rare and truly special if you get to see that. And so that then triggered, it was this special observation that triggered me doing diligence, moving in earnest with a lot of conviction into understanding the granular details that would drive this company here, and that might, position it to be a very big outcome for us and for the market, which to date, we're on track of that thesis. More way to go, of course, but that I thought was very special in a context of a mature market like here, where that just doesn't happen very often.
I think, and by the way, just in case that's where you were going, that still may not necessarily be the number one thing I look for in an opportunity, but we'll get to that. But as you rightly pointed out, I am a huge numbers fan when it comes to evaluating companies, right? Which is why if you shy away from numbers, etc., it's a huge turnoff for me personally. In my,
I have to ask my CFO.
Yeah, exactly. So if the person involved in that statement, if you're watching us, you know who you are. So there you go. That's why we didn't proceed further with you. There you go.
In a way, that's a special statement, but maybe not so special.
That's right. Yeah. So I think, so you make a very good point. Look, we have said executed. Sorry, I was about to say we've executed many episodes, which is true, but I wouldn't say executed episodes. What I meant to say was we have done many episodes speaking about just how important execution is. I think the most recent one where we spoke about that was the one on execution mode, or execution mode, as some people refer to it as. And the way to think of it, perhaps, is one of the best predictors that you will do well, get to a certain scale. Say, for example, if you're claiming that you'll get to 100 million ARR, the best way to predict that is, hey, can you get to 10 million ARR and repeat the same motion?
Mhm.
And does the market size, etc., allow for it? The best way to predict that you will get to 10 million ARR is to perhaps first get to 1 million ARR. Simply because along the way you learn a few things. At that point, maybe the principle of induction takes over. You can repeat it. If you've done it for N customers, for example, presumably you can do it for the N plus 1th customer and so
I
on.
recommend the prime numbers episode.
Yes, which I think is the same as the execution mode episode.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So again, so if you demonstrate excellence in execution, by the way, these are all interconnected. So excellence in execution, it's very, very hard to achieve if you don't have special traits as a founder. But hopefully, you're also looking at the numbers, and when some bottlenecks come up, when weaknesses come up in the numbers, as founders, you investigate that and work on it and solve for that and find improvements, which is why I at least feel in companies that have been around running for a while, the numbers show a lot. Numbers also demonstrate traits which your degrees or where you have worked, etc., may not demonstrate. And you're right. I think a lot of things that Enter demonstrated, some other portfolio companies we backed in early, in the earliest of rounds, when such things comes around, I think it's a very, very special trait because not too many companies have the ability to get that far, being bootstrapped or doing it out of very limited resources because complacency can take over. You're not expected to become profitable or expected to generate a lot of business off of small raises. And, you can always just throw in the towel and try to raise sooner. I think it shows a great deal of grit and ambition and hunger and fire in the belly, etc. If you push yourself to achieve that much more with less money, because I think that's also a predictor of capital efficiency, which I'm not saying that's a special thing we specifically look for, but it's definitely one of those in the second tier of points we look for, which is also a very strong predictor of success.
Agreed.
Of if you take X million dollars or euros, how much can you take, how far can you take the business with that? That's a very good predictor of your success.
So let's talk about maybe another feature of Special that you had found in a deal, more about company again, less about founders. What comes to mind?
So what I wanted to go with, which is usually my number one thing that I look for, not to say that this is exclusively what I look for, but when it happens, it makes it really exciting for me, is if I feel there's a category creator opportunity in front of me, right? What is a category creator? Again, we've made an episode on that sometime last year, so go check that out. But long story short, it is the opportunity where in a business model or a space or a certain category, you're doing something or providing a service or a product in a way where there's no real competitor, or at least no new age competitor quite like you, and you've hacked into the market with your own unique take on the market. But so it is unique and you have hacked your way into the market, but in a way where clearly the market participants like it. VCs may not always like it, and therefore you kind of seem like the wild card, etc. But the customers really like it, and which is why even as you mentioned, businesses like Enter and many other businesses in our portfolio, Inframarket and the likes, they seem to benefit from this. In the early days, it'll look very odd. In fact, it'll almost look like a traditional business in the manner in which it is run, but it's clearly benefiting from tailwinds, from customer demand, and some unique insights which the founders have had to piggyback off of it, right? And if you combine category creator potential with a large market and founders who know what they're doing, how to debottleneck themselves along the way, I think that's for me is like the complete ingredients for a killer opportunity.
In the last 2-3 years, has something like that happened when you invested? This was the specialty?
Last 2-3 years. Look, truth be told, I think we'll have to see how time treats these opportunities. I think if we stretch it to 3 years, I would say Metal Book is very special. Maybe calling it, yes. I think, look, it depends on how far we stretch the definition of category creator. In the sense, are there precedents to that model? Yes. So if we strictly apply the definition, maybe Metal Book would not count as a category creator, but certainly in choosing to focus on that single category, perhaps in its own way, it's a category creator. Interesting. I think some other firms that we have backed who I would say have category creator potential, truth be told, I think need to earn their place to call themselves category creators.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, again, we'll see how it goes, but so far, Snaptrude could potentially be a one of its kind category creator as well, a very different kind of category creator, for example, not a transactional model or a marketplace, etc., but trying to disrupt a traditional product with obviously years of product development going in.
Yeah, makes sense. My mind is racing to Speckle and Rayon, and both companies that, in my opinion, are so special that you won't find them a second time. They are not exactly the same type of special for me now, and also not when we invested, but they do have maybe one special item. And in both cases, by the way, there were multiple special items that made me move with very high conviction on both companies. But so maybe one item they share, and that is they operate in very low NPS and low customer experience industries. And they were able to demonstrate that they can rally a community of users that absolutely love and fight for the product. Both companies demonstrated that basically, in year one. And I absolutely think that community can be a very special item to build category creators, and in AEC especially. AEC, I think many outsiders don't realize it, but AEC is very community oriented. Contractors organize in local associations. They go to the same pubs. Architects globally organize in communities to bash the software vendor or fix each other's problems and help each other that way, etc. And that way, actually, there is a lot of different professions that have similar community dynamics to the developers' communities that you would find, in software around the world.
Yes.
And it's my firm belief, actually, that community is one of the most defensible assets that a company can earn and own. And I believe that a lot of generational companies that, let me actually be even more extreme. I believe that a lot of $100 billion companies that might get built over the next 20 years will own community. It's a firm belief of mine. And so that doesn't mean that if you own community, you will be a $100 billion business. So that's obviously that inference is not possible. But I get fascinated when in a low NPS industry, you can rally a community of hyper satisfied customers that absolutely love you, to the degree where I had a term sheet out for a business that actually, I had a term sheet out, and then I wanted to have a second run at it, and we kind of almost got there, but the founders both times decided to stay bootstrapped in a business that, my God, no generic VC would touch it. Too small market to the generic eye, which is wrong, by the way. It's a big market. There's a bit of a hardware component. It's hardware. I hate hardware, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Amazing business. And these guys have managed to get their customers onto webinars and sell the product to their buddy contractors in the same city, within that community. And then they organize city by city communities like that with the help of their customers. And why do the customers do that? Because they are absolute hardcore power using fans of that business. And that's very special to me when I find these instances. And I found it in Speckle, and I found it again in Rayon. And it's compounding.
By the way, it's quite fascinating. I hadn't even thought of this as an aspect that I deliberately look for in opportunities before you just said this. But it's also interesting if you run with how you defined community, you'll find it interestingly overlaps with many of our best investments who may also have nothing to do with software or design, etc. If you define community as a concept where the startup or the business offers a service or platform or whatever, where once customers get in, they kind of are stuck there. They either get more people in, by the way, when I say stuck, I mean for good reasons and by their choice, and they get other users, etc. And because they're part of the ecosystem and they love it, they'll just keep absorbing whatever you throw at them, right? So it could be more software if it's a product or transactional marketplace, more products, more categories you keep throwing at it. That could also, I think I hadn't even thought of it, but it's a unique recipe which, and you told me this, Patric, it's a recipe which is very effective to create and allow for compounding.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm looking at our investment memo template.
Mhm.
Our template is very raw, very bare bones. So it's it demands a lot of the individual investor to formulate in qualitative words what they find special about a business. So it doesn't give you a lot of hand holding, but it does give you some pointers of what historically has been special for Fundamental. And so that's the part I'm currently looking at. And so here, for example, super high minimum feature set, Snapshot, Speckle, Rayon would qualify for that, I would say.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not going through all of them, but it's another example we had here. Buy ready markets. What about that? Is that a special item for us?
For me personally, it would be a sweetener on top. That by itself, at least for me personally, would not make an opportunity special.
Yeah. I like buy ready markets, and they do become special for me when it's paired with narrowness that doesn't limit the firm's future expansion and be non-obvious and hidden to outsiders. So when you combine those three things, it does have something very special, because you will be able to relatively quickly grow with your customers, build product, discover, build optionality, but very likely in a way where you're not going to encounter tech-enabled competition for a while. So then you can build track record, you can compound, etc. That in itself, I mean, by the way, none of the things that we mentioned here today on the show is like, hey, it's this one reason and that's all that it needs to make an investment at the early stage. So that's not the point. But if you don't have something special, then it's very difficult to make a case, right?
Correct.
So this combination of things, buy ready, very narrow, but doesn't limit your expansion, and non-obvious, hidden to outsiders, that's a special thing. It's not something you find a lot.
Absolutely.
Okay, we talked about net profitability, bootstrapped early. Actually, here's one final item that we could take, Shub, because I think it's one of the most misunderstood concepts in marketplaces and OAS models. Working capital and the return on working capital. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so look, I think the conventional wisdom, and by the way, I've seen it oscillating quite dramatically from one side to the other in the last 4 years. So one camp on working capital is the one which I've heard say, hey, any working capital is bad, right? So that's one camp. And by the way, for those who are listening saying, hey, why is that so? Why would anyone say that? It's because obviously the old wisdom is, hey, look at all these software companies, cloud companies, etc. All those investments have been made without working capital being deployed. So why should you need or deploy working capital as part of your business? That's I guess, the conventional VC thinking. And then there's another camp which says, hey, I don't care about working capital. I only look at your margin structure, right? Again, now this also completely ignores the reality, as we'll get to. Before I answer your question specifically, Patric, I want to mention a point. I recently had met with a founder of let's call it construction tech ecosystem unicorn, right? Quite well known to us, etc., and also very well known firm, as in we enjoy some close proximity to them through our history. So then I was just asking them, hey, how do you rate different VCs, etc.? How do VCs judge you? What have you learned about VCs through these interactions? The fascinating thing that founder told me is, hey, until 2023 or so, most VCs did not even look at a balance sheet before investing. And when they started looking at a balance sheet, most VCs did not know what to interpret from it, right? Which is fascinating considering that working capital, of course, is reported on the balance sheet for those of you who didn't know. So now to come back. So look, so I personally am not on either camp to say, hey, all working capital is bad or don't look at working capital, just look at margin. It's a spectrum. It's basically treat working capital as capital being deployed or capital being allocated to the business. It's as if you, as a CEO or as a founder, you're allocating capital towards your business, and your job is to get a yield that is higher than the cost of capital.
That's
right. So as long as you do that, it's a good use of money, right? If you put out working capital, whether it's 1 day or 10 days, 5 days, if it's a short term, but you get a very small yield, and it was not worth the hassle, that working capital deployment is not good at all. But if you deploy working capital for, say, 30 days, 45 days, etc., and that gives you a terrific yield, say 30%, 50%, and then higher, that is a good use of working capital because it signals that just deploying that working capital is allowing you to create a moat around the business.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I mean, I don't understand when people can't go to the effing first principles and then they parrot away some kind of derivative of first principles, and they don't even understand why they are parroting it. Guys, if you think Berkshire Hathaway is a great company and you think that Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are generational investors, why do you think that? You probably think that because consistently the two of them, or under their stewardship, Berkshire Hathaway was able to generate far, far, far in excess of capital cost returns. I don't know the historical one, let's say it's 50% year over year. Okay, so if you apply the same principle to the deployment of working capital, and your business can generate, Shub, in excess of 25% yield on the working capital,
yeah,
you will beat almost any index, and you will beat a lot of ETFs in their year over year yield.
Yeah.
So what you are is an efficient allocation and cash flow regeneration engine for capital out. I do something with it, capital back in. And the capital back in is 25% more than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
And you think Berkshire Hathaway is fantastic for doing that, but you yourself, if you can generate that, let an investor tell you no working capital is bad. Just run away if you hear it like that. This is the fundamental principle here. So what I'm always saying is, hey, if you're a working capital intensive business and you generate 25% ROCE on working capital or more, and by the way, just to point that out, we have seen cloud manufacturers and marketplaces for periods in their time where they actually did 150%.
Yeah.
We have them in our benchmarks. Yes. I want to throw as much money at you as possible because you are going to make a lot of money for the people that give you capital for the working part.
Yeah. One thing to call out specifically.
That's special.
One thing to call out specifically, if you are a founder who is using working capital or intends to use working capital, it also goes without saying that if we evaluate you, we will judge you on your working capital management skills, which also means that you can't get away just by saying things like, hey, here's my burn and this is what it means. You'll be expected to demonstrate your business's capital needs, because we will not just look at your P&L, we will also look at your balance sheet. So you have to explain where all the sources of capital are, how you'll arrange for it, etc.
Yeah. So a yield on working capital in excess of 25% consistently, not just a month. That's special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. We have more special items, Shub, than we have time for. Also, we still want to stay in business a little longer, and it would be quite detrimental for you and me to give everything to reverse engineer what you and me get excited about. So we'll reserve that for another year until founders put us out of business. But I thought there was a great episode in the context of construction tech and what we look
absolutely for. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, I wish you that you enjoy your weekend.
I wish you the same, sir.
All right. See you next week. Bye.
See ya.